Hello friends, welcome to episode 222 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How are we doing, Rob?
It's Monday.
It's Monday.
For those of you who are listening to this later in the week, it's not Wednesday, it's Monday.
So weird.
By the time I guess I haven't decided if I'm releasing this tonight or if we're going to wait it till Wednesday.
I think port it to Wednesday. You know, give the people listening live a little,
That's true.
little extra cherry on top.
Give them a tickle. Give them a tickle. So.
And those who know to look for our podcast on Wednesday nights, so we'll get it on Wednesday night.
That's true. That is true.
But if you're joining us in the live chat or if you're listening live right now, hello. If you're not, happy Wednesday. I hope it's treating you well.
Yes, and for the time we'd normally be recording this, I should be in Indianapolis, checked into my hotel. Hopefully, stocked up and ready for the next few days of gaming.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got at least two sessions a day.
Yeah.
That I'm doing. At least I don't think I have 3 in any of the days. I think I only have 2. Overwatch, check me on that. I don't have the schedule in front of me. But Overwatch is going with me.
Mm-hmm.
Veteran's going with me, and Civic. Thank you.
Yep.
I can never get it right. So we're all going down. We did this 5 years ago, and it came back around of do we want to do this again? And like magic again, we just pulled it out of nowhere. And got everything that we needed. We actually had stacked up, in some cases, 3 games a day, and Sebek was just like, "Are we sure about this?"
Yeah, man.
And then
when are you gonna have time to enjoy the convention?
There's a lot going on at the convention too.
Yeah.
And so we with very good cause, cut it back to 2 a day, and I think that's going to be fantastic. There's lots of space for food and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If all goes well, I'm hoping to run into a few of our Discord members.
Yeah, you've got a little meetup channel we created on the Discord.
We do.
And then, if you're out there and you haven't joined the Discord yet, but you are going to be at Gen Con and you want to meet Rob, I'm not going to be there, but yeah, if you want to meet Rob and some of our other listeners, there is a little bit of a meetup channel that they're gonna kind of just to make some arrangements there.
Yeah, basically, once I know where everybody's at and we kind of figure things out, it looks like it's probably going to be Thursday.
Okay.
Mid-afternoon if we can pull it together. I don't know how long it's going to be for, but we'll try and see how we can do that. And of course, there is a strong possibility that I will be walking around in a Storyteller Conclave shirt.
Well, you and your cadre will be walking
We're
around
hoping.
in it.
We're hoping.
So...
the shirts are in process of being printed right now, so we really don't even know if everything's going to come out like it should. But
yeah, I was a little worried the deadline was going to be a little tight. But...
it was tight, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Regardless, there'll be some posts on Instagram. I'll throw some stuff in the Discord probably after I get back and I can organize a little bit into the channel. But if you're gonna be there, I'd love to have you guys hop in the Discord, even if it's just to say hey and where you're gonna be at.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I plan on hitting a lot of the systems that we've talked about.
Yeah.
My first game is Lasers and Feelings.
Lasers and Feelings. You've got a new Minara.
I do. Actually, it's a quick start.
It's a quick start, and you come home with the quick start set. You play the game, and then they give you the game.
Yep. I've got a game system I've never played, which is kind of a generic role-playing game.
Mm-hmm.
I've got Bulldogs, which is an alternative, or it's not an alternative. It's a rules adjustment to another system. And which is Fate. I think it's a twist on Fate.
Okay. A twist of Fate. Yeah,
that has space combat and stuff. And I know you were a huge Fate fan and lover.
I don't know if I'm a huge Fate fan. I admire it from a distance, though my experience with it has been fleeting at best.
Yeah. So we're going back to the BattleTech game, which I have the minis you finished.
Sitting right there.
They're sitting right here. These will be... did we get pictures of these set up?
I didn't post them there because I was kind of saving them. I was couching them for Mini of the Week.
No, let's leave that.
On Twitter or now X.
Oh, yeah. It'll be on Instagram regardless. And people can see them there. They are fantastic. They are wonderful.
I can post them up there.
But you can put them in the Discord for Discord members.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
They're kind of like our micro patrons.
Yeah, right on.
Because they're paying with their words and their time, and I think that's fair as well. But for those of you who are in our Patreon, I will be trying to post daily. highlights of things that I find. I am going to try and take my recorder with me, and if I run into certain people, I may do quick interviews with them and post them on the Patreon as best I can, so that you guys can kind of have an experience of... Thank you.
Done and posted.
Awesome. And you can just share a little bit of the experience with me, because I think this year's Gen Con's going to be bigger. I kind of have a sense for how quickly slots filled.
You think there's that post-COVID, like, let's get back to normal, let's go out and do this, we've been fiending for this for several years thing?
Yeah, there's also been an influx of a lot of new games because of the whole, like, we had a really interesting winter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we all rushed, like, not realizing that the OGL incident occurred.
Yeah.
We had all of these new things happen with Cobalt Press, with a few of the other major systems.
Paizo put out their ORC.
Yep.
You know?
So a bunch of people jumped the wagon. I kind of feel like we're at the edge of the new, I'm going to say it, D20 kick. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Where, like, everybody came out with crap.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of hopeful that when I get there, it's going to be like this explosion of stuff. I saw where Paizo stuff is. I saw where Hasbro stuff is, and there's a huge Magic the Gathering tournament going on, obviously.
Oh, sure. Of course there is, yeah.
There's a bunch of board game new stuff that's coming out. The island game that sinks, like you play as a co-op to try and get something and get off the island. I can't remember. Hidden Island?
Oh, God, I don't know.
It's a really cool game.
Sounds like Save Dr. Lucky, but I know that's not it.
It's a board game with tiles. And it's a fast-paced co-op game. They've come out with another edition of it, and I've been asked to keep an eye out for it because it's starting at Gen Con.
Okay.
So I'm going to try and keep an eye on that. But just a lot of really good new vibes that I think are going to be interesting to see. And I'm very interested to see kind of where things go with the general feeling of people.
Yeah, right on.
But there's a lot of games.
Well, it sounds like it's gonna be great.
Yeah.
And I expect like full reports on everything.
Of course. I'll try and take a lot more pictures this year than I did in previous.
And for you potential listeners who may cross our paths, keep an eye out for if we get lucky, keep an eye out for the Storyteller Conclave T-shirts.
Yep.
On a small cadre of individuals.
Yes. Please come up, say hi. I would love to talk to all of you. So we have a 202.
Yeah. Do we have a 202 or do we have a soapbox rant?
So I'm going to start with saying we have a 202.
Okay.
I'm going to set this honey next to you because you're going to need it for your throat and all of the conversation that's about to occur.
Yep. Let's get some tea going here.
We're going to get the tea moving in the right direction.
I'm just going to let you intro this while I breathe deeply.
Yeah. So I'm going to start by saying that we both came into this talking about sandboxes from different angles. Sarah had a lovely discussion with Sean, a couple days ago, like 4 or 5 days ago.
No,
was it this
yesterday.
Weekend?
This was yesterday.
Was it yesterday? Okay.
Yeah, it was yesterday.
For some reason, my brain is messed up.
Sitting on the couch and talking about the video game Elite Dangerous.
And you were talking about exploration, and I think that was an interesting kind of direction for the thoughts on Sandbox, and then I did the opposite thing. I had the dumb idea to ask the internet what it thought Sandbox gaming was, and then proceeded to get exceptionally angry at the results.
But you got exactly the answer that I thought you would,
and I think that's what disappointed me the most. So I think what we're going to start with here is we're going to start with some definitions. Hopefully what I would like to call accurate definitions. And then from there, we're going to go into some of the, I guess, misconceptions and communication issues regarding Sandbox and the term itself, where it kind of births itself from. So I don't think we should start with our thesis statements here because I think they're scary.
No, our thesis statements are scary, yeah.
Because we had to present those to each other just so we knew where we were coming from.
Let's start slow. What is a sandbox? Regardless of opinions, what is a sandbox?
Well, I'm going to start with an opinion because I think this opinion is a good opinion.
All right.
For those of you who have ever seen The Angry GM, they had a pure definition, which was a sandbox is one in which the players are given no objectives or goals, but are merely placed in a game world and told to make their own fun.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that's a very open statement.
Yeah, okay.
It really doesn't define the role of the storyteller or the players in a heavy way. It doesn't lock anything in. So in that sense, I kind of feel like it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
The idea is that a lot of people tend to say that sandboxes are absolute player agency, that there are no pre-drawn plots and nothing is planned. Also, that exploration should be able to go anywhere and do anything within the boundaries of what was presented. Meaning, here's your start point, voila. You know, if you can get there with your things, go.
Yeah.
Some examples of this that are in culture, Minecraft is probably the top seed of this. Because literally you click on the game and they drop you in with nothing. They barely give you a level of tutorial to even know you're supposed to do anything.
It's true.
And the world is unique unless you steal a seed, so unless you know an existing seed and have the things to put in there. Unless you layer some controls on top of it, mods, whatever they may be, you're literally just plunked in a world by yourself and told, here. And that's it.
Yep.
Some people call Skyrim a sandbox game because, again, you're presented with your place in the world, but you are not told that this is the only place you have.
Yeah, you can. It rewards exploration in that if you go off the beaten path, there are things you'll find, there are dungeons to go into, there's treasure to find, quests to stumble upon, and things like that.
There is no greater encouragement by necessarily following the plot. Whatever that may be. Elder Scrolls Online, another, like most online games, tends to have very open play, because you could, here's the plot person standing in front of you, and you literally turn your back to them and go off somewhere else and do something. And ignore every aspect of that. And a lot of people do because they don't realize that's the plot.
Yeah.
And that's because it doesn't tell you that that's the plot. And I think, to a degree, that is another good representation of open world sandbox kind of thing, because again, there are it's an existing world. Things are happening. You can do what you want with it. Does this mean, though, because I haven't said it fully, that there can't be narrative, or else it removes the sandbox?
Yeah.
And that's where that gray line starts to get aggressive.
Yeah, and that's where we start, why we kind of preface this by saying both of us have a little bit of an angry soapbox rant coming in here, because the further we dug into the definition of what a sandbox is and what expectations seem to be prevalent in the community of what a sandbox is and how it functions, the more we realize that it is a bag of contradictory terms that I still to this moment don't understand what people are trying to accomplish with sandboxes.
And I don't know, if the fervor of my argument comes from people who just want to be argumentative about a topic that they don't do. But I find a lot of people who say they run sandbox games, and I look at what they're saying, and I'm like, I think you're not running a sandbox game.
Yeah, because you define it one way, and then you describe what you're running, and it does not fit the definition of what you just said as a sandbox. Yeah.
Right. So we're going to kind of step through before the fight.
Yeah.
And not a fight. That's a terrible way of saying it.
No, but before we start really picking apart what a sandbox
Stirring
is.
the pot.
Stirring the pot is an excellent way to flavor
Before we stir
that.
the pot, I'm kind of glad that our podcast isn't immediately attached to a giant comment blog like YouTube, because I really feel like we're, when these do go to YouTube, we are going. It's going to be better. Let us continue.
We're going to demolish in the comments on this one. Oh well, whatever. It's probably for future us.
So let's start with the basics. What are good components of a sandbox game?
Sure.
So I would say that there's a home point. Now, that home point can shift.
Sure.
right? It is the home base, whether it's a boat, whether it's a house, whether it's a hovel, whether it's a castle. It is a point where players rest. It's where they recuperate. Decisions are made. Sometimes it's the point where a lot of action comes to.
Yeah, sure.
In that sense.
In fact, I dare say that the home base is one of the major aspects of, like, the selling points of the Sandbox game. Because a lot of times you hear, like, oh, if you guys want to, like, build a castle, you can do that,
Yeah.
And there are whole supplements, like, I know MCDM put one out that was, like, the fortresses and fortifications or something like that. Or I forget what the actual name of it is, but he put out something that was about castles, keeps, and fortresses.
Well, I mean, there was original D&D stuff, but way back in the day, back in AD&D, there were supplement books for that kind of stuff that was very common.
The Savage World Fantasy Companion has a whole chapter devoted to building.
There's quite a few systems. Palladium had it.
And people love the idea that in a sandbox game you can just just build your own fort and we can have a castle, guys. And there's like rules for sieging it and
Firefly style games where you're building your spaceship. That's the same thing as a home base. No different.
Sandbox in space. You'd use a traveler. I mean, your ship. We had a whole discussion about how the ship is an extra character.
Yeah. 7C does it with even adds magical layers to it where your characters can be bound to it. It can be their home, and you can edit it at will, basically. So things like that are super common and offer a grounding attachment to the world, which we all say is a great way to keep people invested.
Exactly.
The living world is a thing we talk about a lot. And that is where the world exists outside of that home base. Now, we are talking about either taking an existing setting, even if it's a property that you just like in passing. Maybe you don't have a ton of experience in it. Maybe it's the flavor of that setting. Like, I really like the flavor of Dune, but I may not take Dune whole cloth. Sure. Because there's a lot going on there. But it's having that setting that makes it feel that outside the walls of home there's a whole thing going on.
Yeah, you've got political strife going on, even just down to the local ecology of different creatures living in different places, ruins of ancient civilizations that speak to an older past.
And it's understanding that setting, and we've talked about world building a lot of times in this, where don't go beyond the mountains, understand it, but don't don't go into detail, leave the gaps. Dungeon World does a great job of draw the map, but leave lots of blank spots.
Oh, we'll come back to Dungeon World.
So the idea is, you need to know what's going on, kind of like from the perspective of your players going on a vacation. Like, when you go on a vacation, you might have a brochure that kind of tells you about the restaurants or things that you're interested in, but it doesn't tell you all of the details.
Yeah, sure.
You may not even know what the weather's like when you get there, right? But you may have looked it up to make sure you're traveling in a good season. So kind of that's the aspect of living world you want to have. You want a brochure.
Yeah.
That understands it. Not a 3,000-page lore book.
Or even maybe just a friend who says, don't go more than a mile from your hotel.
Exactly. Exactly. The next kind of piece on that is an NPC cast. Now, we see this... we see people talk about making sure NPCs are in your scenes, that are part of your plots, but having a cast, or even small, and I'm saying very small, we're talking like between 3 to 5, not much, but these are the regular people that live or exist around the home. If it's space, maybe they're people who show up at the space docks, that you see on a regular basis.
Sure.
If it's your physical home, maybe it's the mailman, the FedEx guy. If you're in a school, the janitor, these are people who give information, who have the ability to procure things, but also through them can sprinkle, and that's what I'm going to be getting to next here, what's going on outside the doors.
To me, this is a logical extension of the living world.
Yes.
When we say, that the world goes on without regard for the PCs, as we'll get to in a little bit here. And the world lives and breathes and has all this other stuff going on. I mean, it has to be populated with people. You know?
A good connection point for those of us who are, I'm not going to say at the geriatric age yet, but we definitely feel it, is a lot of our early TV shows that we had as children had these heralds who would come. Mr. Rogers had people who came to his house and heralded what was going on outside.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just what was going on in the house, even though that was its own adventure to its own right, but when things were coming in from the outside world, that made the world feel living. So these heralds are necessary to be able to bring those things in. Sprinkles are the difference here, and I'm using the term sprinkles instead of breadcrumbs. The reason why are these are sweet things that just sit out there. They have no attachment. Their calories mean nothing. They are literally just there to be like, I'm intrigued in that cookie.
Ooh, a piece of candy.
Yeah.
Ooh, a piece of candy.
Exactly.
Ooh,
They
a piece
don't
of candy.
they don't lead a trail at all, because you shouldn't think about them more than anything other than the piece of candy that they are.
Yep.
They're there to find out what flavors the characters are interested in.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's the whole purpose of it there. And, as I like to say, you put it down and you forget about it. You just watch to see who grabs it. And then once they grab it, you see if they enjoy it. And if they enjoy it, then you can step on from there.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the point of it all. Like, without that, there is no flavor to the world.
Sure. And, variety, I think, is important here, because what you want to look for as a storyteller in this, especially if you are going to run a true sandbox, is, as much as that term exists, you want to see which one of your players picks it up, eats it, and goes, y'all got any more of them donuts?
Exactly.
And, okay, now you know what to put more of out there.
And that's what brings us to our last one, which is listening to the players. Yep. Sandbox games require you, by design, to listen to the players. It is a reactive style of gameplay until it is not.
Yep.
And that's the part that makes my heart kind of twist a little bit in my comments that I have read. But I will get to that. That is my sandbox. I'm putting it off to the side. Regardless, it is meant to be a place where you listen into that feedback, whether it's during session or at the end of the session, to hear what they're interested in.
Yeah.
If maybe you didn't catch the fact that person stowed away that item and then later was like, yeah, I want to learn more about this. Can I go to the library next session? You're like, yes. Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
And now you have something.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where things diverge.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Now, at this point, I'm stepping back very lightly.
All right. So, we talked about what a sandbox is.
Correct.
We talked a little bit about the
How?
elements that should make up a good, solid sandbox.
Yeah, how a sandbox.
Now let's talk about why a sandbox.
Oh, boy.
Because, this sounds like, I don't know, it could sound like a lot, it could sound like a little, I guess, depending on how you're looking at things and how deep you're reading into things.
The biggest thing that I always hear, I'm going to start with that, is it's different than a tailored plot.
Yeah.
And I'm air quoting this in hard air quotes. I don't have the Count Strahd adventure laid out in front of me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, Candlekeep. I don't have something that is literally laid out with specific things so that when an NPC shows up, they're going to talk about the dead ant that just happened and don't know what happened, and it's a mystery that leads to this other enigma.
The character from the Pink Panther?
Something like that.
Dead ant.
Yes,
dead ant,
thank you.
Dead
Thank
ant,
you.
dead ant. Yeah.
So, to say that, it's the term, an idea of giving a sense of exploration and freedom to the players.
Yeah, I think, I think that sounds like the biggest draw I always hear about sandbox games. And he's actually in the room right now, so I will make eye contact with him when I say this. This is something I hear from Sean all the time, about the attraction of a sandbox-style game. He's actually expressed that he wants to do something like this with the Nova Praxis. But we've gone back and forth on it for quite a bit. And, hey, it's his game. I'm not going to tell him how to do it, but hopefully he, sees some of the pros and cons here.
Pause for just a second.
Yeah.
You live with him. You might tell him how to do it. But again, it's still his choice to take it or not.
It's his game. I'm very hands off with that.
Yeah. We really haven't gotten into spouses of game masters who game master and how that always works or doesn't work. But that is a different show.
To be fair, he asks my opinion. I give it to him.
I know. We did talk about the whole friends versus GMs.
Yes.
But we're going to skip on.
All right. So Why a sandbox? Because it sounds cool, right? Like, when you think about, having a sense of exploration and a sense of freedom, go anywhere, do anything, you're the master of your own destiny. It sounds exciting. It's a hell of a sales pitch, honestly. No, I know.
No,
you're,
my breath was
sighing wearily right now.
No, my sigh was actually to it reminded me the first time that I was kind of reading that joyousness of it was like the return to Dragonlance, rugged adventurers finding their way across a land and discovering their choices.
Yeah, sure.
Becoming heroes by chance more than anything else, and making the decisions of not this. I don't want to do this. We're just going to move on. Have a nice day. This is your problem, not mine.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a choice.
Okay, yeah, sure. You made that choice, but it was your choice.
Yes.
And now we're going to go find something else that might be adventure for us, right? And the other big draw is for, players who want, or I should say storytellers who want something a little more simulationist in nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
A big draw for a lot of people is realism.
Yes.
And, I mean, I say verisimilitude. Ron Blessing broke me of that. But the idea that you're not the chosen ones or anything, you have no destiny, you're just an average Joe, and the world doesn't cater to you. It makes it more immersive that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, none of us are the chosen one, right?
No.
None of us have a great big destiny. We just work our 9 to 5 and we go to sleep at the end of the day, and hopefully we fit in a couple hours of chores and video games.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we wake up the next day and do it again.
Unless we are, and then we don't want to be the chosen one in our TTRPGs. Maybe there is something to be said there.
There is something to be said there, yes.
There must be a lot of chosen ones out there.
But, it doesn't make any presumptions about, your character's place in the world.
Right, because it's the player's choice that matters.
Sure.
It's not the storyteller presenting who your player is.
Exactly.
So your choices have more weight than what is given to you.
Exactly. And there's no worry that, anything you put in there is going to be uninteresting to the players since they have chosen it. If they engage with it, it's obviously something they like. And if they don't engage with it, they can just move on. There's no railroading them into the plot. It's true freedom. So the storyteller only needs to write what's directly in front of the players and react to their choices in a meaningful way, right?
Yeah, sure.
And if it sucks, hit the bricks. If you guys don't engage with something, guess what? You've saved me, the storyteller, a lot of writing.
Sounds
easy. Yeah, it sounds easy.
The question is what do you really mean by exploration?
Yeah.
Do you want me to pull the box out?
No, well,
okay. You're getting there.
I'm all right. The microphone's already set up. If I get on a soapbox, I'm gonna have to move things. So y'all are gonna have to deal with me right where I am.
It's Monday. Deal with it.
What do you mean by exploration?
Yes,
okay?
that was the question.
That's, I think, the big draw of Sandbox. Explore everything, do anything, go anywhere, choose your own destiny. Okay, so what do we mean when we say exploration? The term gets thrown around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it probably does a lot more work in Sandboxes than it's given credit for. Okay?
I would agree.
Because without exploration, really, what is a sandbox? It's just a little bit of milling about, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
The whole draw of a sandbox is to go out in the world and just find stuff to do. So, exploration needs to be defined in a way that is meaningful to gaming, okay?
Well, I'm going to start with one piece here that I think is the part that triggers me a little bit in this, and that is and I'm going to take Minecraft as an example.
Yeah.
When you drop into Minecraft, you are a person, and you will do what you choose to do. There is no limitations to what you're doing. You can just do it.
Mm-hmm.
If I am gaming with 5 other people, and I drop into Minecraft, what do? We explore. Together?
Separate.
Shouldn't we be dividing and conquering. I mean, like at that point, confusion sets in.
Right. What are you looking for? Do you have a definition? Do you have a goal?
Right.
Right.
But now that you're defining a goal,
Yeah.
Did we just break from
Are we no longer a
sandboxing
sandbox?
exploration? And even with exploration, decisions have to be made about where you're going. And in that sense, like you were saying, there has to be meaning. Meaning, like, we want to set up a castle. Okay, where would we do we want to make it a sand castle on the shore? Or do we want to make it up there at that mountain? Oh, I can see a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it up in the mountain. That sounds cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now we'll go to the mountain. So now you're exploring to the mountain, on your way to the mountain to do that thing.
Sure.
There's a meaningful gameplay that gets you from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that change in exploration of choosing a path that is anywhere, right? So I'm in a space game. I can see a star. I'm going to jump to that star and figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
All of that sounds great when you remove the storyteller. And it's just a bunch of random tables because it's directionless.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
At that point, we don't know what's going on. The question I have for you is, how does curiosity work out in that?
Well, okay. Exploration needs to be three things.
Okay.
All right. Exploration needs to be three things. It is the ability to travel in any random direction you want.
I think that's fair.
Okay. You need to be able to find something interesting there.
Okay, I like that one.
And it has to have meaningful gameplay potential. I.e., so many games where this discussion originally came up with regards to Elite Dangerous.
Oh, man.
Which is often described as a mile wide and an inch deep. What is exploration like in that game? You go to places and you look at them and you go, those are interesting rocks.
And then nothing.
And nothing happens. Yes. You can do anything with the interesting rocks except for say you've looked at them once you make it back to civilization, and somebody might pay you a little bit of money for that, for having looked at a rock.
Yeah, and if you call what they tell you about that rock lore, we might slap your hand.
All right, so let's break this down a little bit. Ability to travel in any random direction off the beaten path. That sounds great. Go anywhere, do anything, right?
Hex crawl. Empty hex crawl.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this is the true essence of a sandbox, right?
Sure.
Perfectly directionless.
Sure.
You guys tell me where you want to go. I'm not going to railroad you anywhere. The PCs should have the potential of traveling anywhere their feet can take them.
Mm-hmm.
Or ship or whatever.
Whatever
you know what
the
I mean.
situation is.
Okay. What draws them there, though, other than curiosity?
And that's kind of what I'm saying, is that you have to know something's there.
Right. So, i.e., is it okay to use plot hooks in a sandbox? And if you're writing plots, i.e. plot hooks, is it still a sandbox? Or are you just giving them a handful of stories to choose from and then tailoring those stories anyways?
Right, like, do you just have a hidden list of pre-generated adventures under the table with the numbers on them? Oh, you guys grabbed box 102. Book, and here's the adventure.
Yeah.
Okay, is that a sandbox, or is that just a randomizer to help you get to a pre-generated adventure?
Exactly. Heatsink actually says they need to know the world, right?
Yes.
And so it's knowledge of that world. They might be able to make an educated decision to go out there, but like that puts a lot of work on your players, right? Most of us don't even read the game manual.
Yeah.
Let alone study up on a bunch of lore for the world that we're all going to be playing in. Now, I do because I'm a huge nerd.
That is true.
But, like, as good as my group is, I have plenty of people who, at my table who barely know the lore beyond what I've presented.
Well, and what interests one player doesn't interest everyone.
Sure, and that's fine, because at my table I am giving you guys a tailored plot, and you don't need to worry about the, 3,000 years of history that happened before you guys in the formation of Cyrodiil and the Alessian, blah, 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 right?
Right.
You don't need to know it. Would it help understand what the Aelids were, and, when you go into these Aeliad ruins and stuff? Sure. It would add flavor to it.
Sure.
It's not necessary, though, and if you ask, I'll give you the lore, and then we can move on, you know? But in a sandbox, though, to make any sort of educated decision, it requires that sort of proactiveness on your players, and that's not going to be for everybody.
No.
And then again, like I said, if you're writing plots, are you even still doing a sandbox then? Or are you just doing a random grab bag of pre-generated adventures?
Or worse yet, and I'll say worse yet, and I mean it, are you just rolling on a random table?
Yeah. See also hex crawl. We'll get there.
Yeah.
All right. So the second tenet.
Yes.
Find something interesting when you get there.
Yes.
Okay. This is something Elder Scrolls Online, I think, does exceptionally well.
Sure.
There was a number of times when I was playing that game regularly where I would go into a zone I've never been in before, and I would just wander off the beaten path. I would see something mildly interesting. From that point, I would see something slightly more interesting. From there, my curiosity would just take over, and I'm like, hey, I wonder if I can jump over that cliff, actually. And then I do, and I'm like, God, am I even supposed to be down here? Did I clip out of the map? And there's a dungeon there? Oh, I guess I am supposed to be here, because there's a dungeon here. Like, the devs put something here. And there's like, how are you supposed to get here? How are you supposed to find this? Well, that's how you're supposed to find it. You're supposed to get curious and look. There's an empty spot on your map that you haven't been to. Wonder what could be there.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's kind of the feel that we're going for here in a true sandbox game, okay? But we start begging a lot of questions then when we say find something interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. What constitutes interesting to your group?
And it might be different.
Like you said, you've got 5 disparate people at your table. Now, and if you're going true sandbox, these people have all made their characters in absentia of one another. Sure. They haven't formed an adventuring group with a goal or a cohesive unity, so they've all got their own ideas of what's going to be going on in the sandbox world. God forbid that happens. What's interesting? How do you define that? All right. Second, then, of course, that begs the question about what the purpose of your campaign is.
To do.
Who are these PCs?
Yeah.
What are their goals? Does the interesting thing they find pertain to their goals?
Yeah.
If it doesn't pertain to their goals, will it still be interesting to them? Will it spark an interest, or will it just be, this doesn't advance my own personal agenda, ergo it can be ignored? I don't know. You don't know. And it might be individual per person. And if your campaign has a goal and a purpose and a direction, are you still running a sandbox?
I'll get to that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Next question. How interesting?
Yeah.
Okay, so what constitutes interesting, and how interesting are we talking? Are these things meant to be momentary dalliances, or should they have greater weight? I.e., is it just a random dungeon that you go into, you fight a couple monsters, you get some treasure, and you come out of it, and you don't ever think about it ever again? It gets discarded like tissue.
To a degree, like the hexes along the path of a one-ring game.
Yeah.
It is just something that happens along travel. A lot of times what people see when they're traveling in D&D, a random encounter. Something that doesn't necessarily, that may fit the ecology of the space, but that's about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. And then what are the PCs meant to do with the things that they interact with? Okay, so is there a deeper meaning to them? Are we looking for like a connection to other points of interest, like a lost civilization discovered in different scattered ruins?
Right.
Or, you know, other than go, oh, that's interesting, what impact are we expecting?
And I think this is where a little bit of the sandboxing kind of bleeds into fiction crafting, where it's if the players believe that is what it is. Like, oh, I found ruins here, and I found ruins there, therefore these ruins are tied together. And you just don't make them disbelieve that.
Right. You wait for your players to say, there's got to be a connection here, and then you go, oh yeah, I can make those connected.
Or you don't, and you just let them believe what they believe, and you just keep making more randomness.
Yeah, that's actually
I'm not saying that
probably more accurate to what the...
Which is what I've found, and I'm still going to hold myself back. So please continue.
All right. And then, so the next question is, with these points of interest, are they random or are they crafted?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sure you did a lot more online research
I did.
Of public opinion than I did on this one, so I'm sure you actually have an answer to this one.
I do.
Are they random or are they just crafted? Like, does crafted become just writing plot?
Right.
Are you force-feeding or are you railroading your players if you say, okay, here's the thing, then this is why it's interested and this is how it fits and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's random, how do you make it make sense in your world and have weight for the PCs if it's just, I rolled a 2d6 and that's what came up?
Right.
It's not a symptom of the ecology that you've set out.
Right. Or is it just, this is the ecology, this is how it is. If you find that interesting, that's your choice.
Yeah.
Like, this is just the truth. It's just sitting here.
Yeah.
This is how gravity works.
Yeah.
It's not interesting, it's just what it is. Yeah.
And just the way you said that made me bored.
I'm getting there. But, okay, so I guess the last point that I have to this to ask you about is, you said this has to have meaningful gameplay potential.
That's the rub. That's the rub.
How can it?
When you get there, you have to be able to do something. Think back to what I said about Elite. You go there, and you find the rocks, and you're out there to look for interesting things, so you have found an interesting thing. Okay? Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
But it has to have meaningful gameplay potential.
Yeah.
In Elite, this is, I held down the scanner button for 10 seconds, and it put a little mark that I've explored it.
And I now have exploration data.
Yeah, I can sell that when I go back to port. I can't mine those rocks.
Right.
I can't scientifically scan those rocks to see if they have mineral value that I could then maybe set up a refinery and refine them into raw materials, or maybe build a spaceport here so other people can access these rocks. No.
What do you think this is, EVE Online?
None of that. I looked at the rocks. That's the gameplay.
Yeah.
Go home and appreciate your bank account getting slightly larger.
Yes.
All right, so in our sandbox games, in our TTRPGs, what do you do when you discover a point of interest like this? Is it a dungeon? Do they have a reason to delve into it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a settlement? Do they have any reason to go visit it? How will the interesting thing be interacted with? What outcomes do you have?
What's the gift at the end?
Yeah. And will that outcome further the goal of the group?
Yep.
And again, if we have goals, is it a sandbox?
Personal goals versus campaign goals.
Right. So ultimately, like, I find like, you know what? I'm not even going to draw conclusions here.
Nope.
Those are my definitions of exploration, okay? There is a lot more to think about with exploration than go to place and interesting thing happen.
Correct.
I will turn it right back over to you because you have some thoughts skimmed from the World Wide Web.
It is nearly an hour into the show, and I am sorry to say this show is probably going to run 2 hours. So if at this point you are not wanting to hear us stand on soapboxes and talk about the internet...
I think 2 hours. I think 2 hours is overestimating it. We're 45 minutes in.
I'm just going to put this out there.
You got room to breathe.
I got a little bit. So I'm going to start with something. You liked Metroid. It was one of your favorite games.
Super Metroid was one of the best games I've ever played.
I played it a little bit, but I found a quote, and I thought that it was good. I thought it was fitting.
Spot on as a ravening feral fangirl of Super Metroid. Your quote is spot on.
The quote is, when you played Super Metroid, you pointed out how the exploration worked because of how carefully, linearly designed everything was. And how important that is to avoid leaving the players lost and frustrated. Sandbox games claim that they're great for exploration, but have none of that careful design which makes the exploration fun.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is that you look when you start in Metroid, you can go where you want.
Within reason,
Right? There are things that are blocking your way because you don't have access to them.
Exactly. We've anybody who's dabbled even a little bit in video games has heard the term Metroidvania.
Mm-hmm.
And this is exactly the philosophy that designs that heuristic of something being a Metroidvania. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because Castlevania did very much the same thing in a lot of its later games, specifically like Symphony of the Night, where you would start off with limited access, but you had freedom to move about where you had access to.
Yeah.
Eventually, you would stumble upon something, you would make a discovery, an item, or weapon, or something like that, that would allow you to open new doors.
Yeah.
And now you would have whole other regions of the map that you could go into, but these weren't linear. It wasn't A into B, B into C, C into D.
Mm-hmm.
It was A connects to B, C, and D, and if you go into B, you find the item that allows you to go back into A, up into C, which gets you another item, which allows you to go back into A again, maybe back into B to get into E, but also into D, which opens up F.
Yeah. I mean, but the idea being that each one of those steps not only gains you access, but gains you knowledge.
Yes.
Gains you abilities in some cases. And because of that non-linear decision choices, still lets you move all over the place.
Yeah, and that's not even to say anything about what we call sequence breaking.
Right.
Which is finding a clever solution to get past one of these artificial barriers.
Yes.
Sneak your way into B long before you ever get the item that's supposed to let you get in there.
So I think in that sense, that is a good way of talking about exploration and making it meaningful, giving it all of the qualities that is necessary for exploration to work. I think it's very challenging to do that without it effectively not being a sandbox by the cultural definition.
Exactly, because this sort of reward for exploration requires careful crafting, which is something that a lot of people feel is antithetical to the sandbox design to begin with.
Which brings me to the beginning of my discovery. So, as I was looking through to see how the internet at large, how community and the TTRPG community, storytelling, even some of the older stuff, I was looking back probably conservatively as long ago as 1999.
Okay.
Because really there was a large surgence of different forums that helped pull some of that information together.
Yeah.
One of the things, well, I'm kind of walk through some of the commentary so we can break it down. We did it, and so I can get it out to some of our listeners. And that is, I do believe that there is a lot of misrepresentation out there. And that's kind of where I'm going to start from this, but I'm going to explain it by walking through some of these commentaries.
Yeah, I would say the colloquial definition of a sandbox is a bit of a mess.
Well, it's a heck of a mess because not only the definition changes through the commentary of a single individual, but in re-explaining it by someone else, their definition redefines it in a totally different way.
Yep.
Prepare
yourself for this is what a sandbox is, and this is the game I run, which is a sandbox, which doesn't fit the definition I just gave.
So I'm going to start with this that was interesting. Most elites go about it poorly. I love opening with that. They sprinkle enormous threats randomly among the hexes without establishing the narrative history of the ecology. The monsters are just there in their lairs, waiting for poor adventurers to wander into the wrong cave. They might be some modicum of interaction with the world, such as a dragon who holds a nearby village in their thrall, but for the most part, they're static enemies. This concept that you pre-populate your map with monsters that are just there, that your players will find as they march around the highlands, is Sandbox technically.
Yeah.
In their definition, but the thought of it not being part of a world removes how your players can even think about it.
Right.
Now,
they can't draw any logical conclusions from that setup because the setup itself is random. There's no clues to indicate what is in the next hex.
Yeah. I walk into a restaurant, ask for a table, and I see booths, high tops, 3 bars, a private room that's just sitting by itself, and 1 lone chair. And I'm like, where am I eating?
Mm-hmm.
And then as I sit down, a dessert tray passes me with French crepes, at the same time as tacos, at the same time as a large slab of beef that is literally on fire, and 2 aliens talking on a platter with a fork out of one of their heads.
Welcome to Ramshorn.
Yes, I have no idea what's going on, and no one's handed me a menu.
Mm-hmm.
That is this design of open box.
Yep.
It's open sandbox. So the internet doesn't know as a whole, and there is no good definitions. And it leads this on to this comment, which the entirety of it made me angry.
Yeah.
But the presentation of this particular part gave me hope and disgust at the same time. A sandbox is not goal-oriented, nor non-goal-oriented. A sandbox is alive, a world that gives 0 Fs for the players, but it's worrying about itself. The world came first, not the players. Nothing is scaled, nothing sits in its cavern chamber waiting for the player to happen along. The ecology exists because it makes for a dynamic world. The global regional events that are escalation or de-escalation or vanish happen because the world is alive. Some of you may be saying, that sounds like a sandbox.
That sounds great. It sounds so great.
That sounds like a complicated mess to keep track of. If you are literally ignoring the players and what they've done,
and instead running a world simulation in the background.
you're running Minecraft.
Yeah.
You are literally running Minecraft while your players are dabbling around. In my personal opinion, why are you even there?
Yeah, I mean, your opinion is why you even there. My opinion is who's running all of these calculations.
Yeah.
Who is figuring out what is going on in every hex of your map that the ecology is living and breathing, and like if you're not worrying about where the players are and you're trying to make your world just breathe and then your players can move around it, like that sounds like 30 times more work than you ever need to be doing as a storyteller, because your players aren't experiencing 29 of those 30 things.
And also, their goals no longer matter.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it kind of matters to them individually, but you're not listening. The world's not going to alter when they make a choice within it, because all those people have goals, and again, we're there long before the players, and we'll be there long after the players.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a great commentary if you want to think about how to be a god. If I want to NPC a god, that is a great way to do it. Yeah. I will be here after you. You mean nothing to me.
Mm-hmm.
You want to interact with me? That's how I'm going to respond.
That's how I roleplay the dragons in my setting.
Yeah, and in all honesty, it should be how all characters at a higher level than a higher quote unquote level in cultural design should react.
Heatsink says it's quantum ogres all the way down. Buddy, we'll get to quantum ogres because that will trigger some people in the sandbox discussion.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. So, but what I want to say is that when we're talking about a sandbox, we are literally defining a metaphor that is known. You put your child in a sandbox to let them play with the sand. Mm-hmm. There is a physical box around it.
The operative word in sandbox is box.
If it's just the sand, an endless form of sand, that's called a desert, and nobody wants to go around in a desert.
Charitably, it's a beach.
No, because you know what a beach has?
Water.
You know what a beach has? Grass and other things beyond the other side of it. This is just sand. That's called a desert. And you're stuck in it, and there's nothing else there but sand.
Yep.
So let's talk about those boundaries. These
also
are
beach volleyball.
Well, possibly. Because again, now you're saying it's a beach box, not a sandbox.
Fair.
Because you've just told me what's in the box.
Oh god, I'm railroading you.
Well, maybe as a player you're helping to define it. In that case, we're playing Powered by the Apocalypse, and it's not a sandbox game anymore according to the internet. So stop it. Everybody just stop it. Let's really get defining of what a damn sandbox is and get over it. But along with that, I'm going to step into 2 other words that make me angry about this topic.
Oh, my goodness.
So let's talk a little bit about some misconceptions and some concerning trends.
All right.
I found now I'm getting a little higher in the box.
Take a deep breath first off before you go into this.
Let me get some tea.
Let's just roll it back a second here.
All right. So the internet as a whole, as I was going through this, had a lot of commentary, and one of the biggest things that they kept talking about was player agency. For instance, Sandbox to me is player agency. A sandbox is when players make the decisions. They decide what is a sandcastle. The DM sees their sandcastle and makes it into a kingdom. Then they crush the sandcastle and an empire falls. Okay. Defining player agency as their ability to come up with all of the creative concepts that need to come out in the game is an incorrect statement. I'm not going to go into the higher levels of that, but effectively what you're saying is that you as a GM no longer have to have original thoughts. It is all up to what the players come up with from the sand that you've given them.
And moreover, it heavily implies that the storyteller is just there in service to the players and basically should be taking instruction or dictation from them.
And what I will say to that is that right there is not player agency. That is a GM-less game.
Yeah.
What you've just done is created a GM-less game.
Yeah.
If you want to play those, there's nothing wrong with that. Just stop calling it player agency.
You're not doing anything other than running a background simulation for them at that point.
Correct. This went on to say, the opposite would be a railroad. The same content, but the DM guides the players through the material. They've built the sandbox and are letting the players interact with what they've made, rather than the DM interacting with what the players are interested in. Number 2. Railroading is not having a plot and driving your players through that plot. It is taking the agency that they take to that plot away from them and telling them what steps have occurred. At that point, you're writing a book. You're forcing them down a very narrow path instead of just accepting them. So what I will say to this commentary is the fact that they don't understand what player agency is, and they really don't understand what railroading is.
Yeah.
Because if you take away what they said and say, the same content, but the DM guides the players through the material, yes, that's called an adventure.
Yeah.
That's called a campaign.
Yeah.
You're guiding them through the content, not a novel. That's the difference. Content is different than a novel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I've written the story, then yes, I'm railroading them. This is how I see things go. But if I don't, and I just have, here's the thing that's happening now. Oh, that's the way you handled it? Okay, here's what's next.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what the content produces. That's fine. There's nothing that's wrong within that framework.
The opposite would be railroading, I think, is the one that I take the big issue with, because it's like there's so many other options beyond player agency and railroading, you know?
Yes.
Like, there's literally a whole middle ground just called the consequences of your actions.
Yes.
You know, the logical outcomes that are still out of your control, that is not railroading to say something bad happens to your characters because you made a crappy choice.
Yes.
You know?
I mean, we said that before. The last thing I'm going to throw at this second to last thing I'll say is that, and this was very common to see, and I think this comment put it to perspective of what I saw out there as a commonality, was sandboxes shouldn't be attempted unless you've been running games for a while or your improv is spectacular. Sandbox games tend to fall apart, and this is the neat part. True sandbox, where the GM kind of leans back and hopes for the players to amuse them, unless you also have a very good group of players with very detailed characters. If you think being a DM is sitting back and watching your very good role players amuse you to create your content, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
You are not a storyteller.
You're not doing anything, honestly.
You're not...
It's another DM-less game.
Correct. You're just watching. You're perusing what is going on. You're not listening to what they're doing their hopes, their dreams, their drives, and tying that to something narrative. You're just running a simulation and helping them with their tables and their rule checks and laughing along with them.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you're doing there. This leads to my last comment, which is about scaling. Sandboxes tend to mean freedom. It has to mean encounters aren't scaled to the party.
Oh, and this one made you extraordinarily angry, and I didn't get angry about it, but
I get angry because what we're talking about has nothing to do with scale.
yeah,
It has everything to do with narration and plot, and they're bringing leveling and scale, which is a concept for D&D, for games where gaining levels by murdering or stealing or doing an activity so that I can be better and better equipped to do the next thing. That's scaling.
yeah,
That's why you need scaling.
yeah. It's a lot of like the mentality. See, I understand the nuance in this comment.
I agree.
Right.
But we're back to semantics causing problems, which is where I'm coming from. But continue with your thought. I want you to finish it.
Right. Okay. So for me, I kind of get where this is coming from, and so sandbox tends to mean freedom. It has to mean encounters aren't scaled to the party. Okay. And what to me this means is, if in your narrative there is a red dragon that lives at the top of the an elder red dragon that lives at the top of the volcano, right? Oh, did we just hit outro music again?
We went right through it.
Oh my goodness.
Right through my conversation. So, hey, do me a favor, Overwatch. When did it start? Like, what was I saying when it kicked in? Because I'll roll back.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
We'll see if we can recover this a little bit, because I think I know roughly where it hit.
But anyways,
Continue your thought.
So if in your story you say that there's a red dragon living at the top of the top of the volcano, right?
Sure.
And your party says, well, we're level 3, adventurers. Assume we're just playing D&D, right? That's a perfectly valid game to be playing. And we're gonna go up on top of the mountain because, in a very metagame sense, we understand that the storyteller is going to give us challenge rating 3 stuff because we're only level 3, and it wouldn't be fair if he just threw an elder red dragon at us, and you throw an elder red dragon at them and wipe them in one hit. It's their dumbasses that went up there, and you get to say, hey, buddy, this wasn't scaled to the party. Like, I'm not going to make that dragon a young red dragon so you can kill it. I told you it was an elder red dragon, and you still chose to go up there and antagonize it.
Right.
Okay. So, charitably, I understand what that means. Okay. However, where this starts to become a problem is when there is no foreshadowing to tell you there is a red dragon on top of the mountain.
Or, and I will say this on the other side of this because I forgot this originally, was you're also having to communicate with your players that scaling is off the table. If there's a preconception that that's the way it's supposed to be, that's your fault as a storyteller to not communicate that.
Yeah. First off, I don't think anyone thinks that you should be scaling. To me, that is a metagame concern.
Well, I think that's a D&D thing that was put out in the world a long time ago as a mistake.
Yeah, it's a very largely D&D thing.
Well, it's also a video game thing.
But it's a video game thing, and we've talked a little bit before about the reciprocal effect of D&D influenced video games, and then video games begin to influence D&D, and then they just do that forever. Into perpetuity. But where this starts to have some real problems is like where a lot of people run their quote-unquote sandbox games as hex crawls, right? And in a traditional hex crawl, you're going to be rolling a lot on like random charts and stuff like that. And you won't know what is in the next hex on the map until you enter it, and then we find out what happens, right?
You make a decision to either stay or leave.
And so you'll have a lot of like, cutthroat, hardcore sandbox storytellers who are like, well, I don't scale things to the party. If you end up on a hex with a big elder red dragon on it and it kills you, so what? That's just how my world goes. It doesn't care about you. But again, it's a random roll, so there's no ecology, there's no clue to tell you that, like, all the telltale clues that there should be a red dragon in this hex, maybe we shouldn't go there.
Or even if there wasn't, even if it was like a hidden, back behind the, I have a DM screen, you don't, I know where all the battleships sit, and you're ticking through, and I'm just waiting for you to cross it, and you crossed into that area. Oh, that's the way it is.
Yep.
This is how the ecology works. You didn't see the signs. You didn't get the lore to know that. Oops.
Right.
You hid plot information behind challenges that the players didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's which
all because you wanted to maintain the illusion that the world doesn't care about them.
that there's a fog of war as well.
Yeah, that there's a fog of war, and you can't possibly know these things. And if you just happen to stumble into deadly danger, then that's just the way the world goes.
Yes. And again,
suck it up, Buttercup.
If you're doing a survival game that is roguelike,
yeah,
then it has to have some sort of functional enjoyment within that framework.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with playing that game design, but if the whole thing is we clear the map, and at the end of the map, there's some benefit. I literally read where a guy jumped into a game, luckily near the end, where literally the whole purpose was just to uncover all the hexes. And when they did that, there was another map with with blank hexes, and they continued. And literally the players all left the game. They're all like, and we're done. And he's like, well, what's wrong? Aren't we going to keep going? They're like, no, we finished the map. We're done.
Yeah, like
they kept playing.
Why? What's the damn
because
point?
They were hoping there would be something of value after finishing all the hexes, and there wasn't.
Congratulations, all your tedious work got you more tedious work.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. And I think that's where a lot of people don't like the grind of grind games, where it's I grind this so that I can get to my next level, which requires me to get more items that I have to grind to get to the next level, which gives me a new item that I now have to grind different materials to get to the next level. But there's no benefit to what I'm doing, what I'm producing, other than money, which becomes meaningless.
Becomes meaningless after a fashion. Right?
Yeah. One of the greatest things that I ever saw was, why do we play Eve? Why are you a miner in Eve? In solo, or a small group.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so we have enough money to buy the ships we want. To do what? To go exploring. To do what? To find more mining places that you can hide out in before, so no one else can steal it from you there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do it again until you have to do it again.
Yeah.
Is that the game grind loop? Is that enjoyable? And that was a legitimate question. I'm not questioning. I need
rocks
to know.
so you can get enough money to buy a better ship to find different rocks to click on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Until you find that that's not enough.
Yep.
And then you make your own drama.
Yeah.
Because you're bored with lots and lots of money.
Yes.
And then when someone sees that you have lots and lots of money, they want your lots and lots of money. So, and I think that's where player drive pushes into this a little bit, is because, sure, you can still have an open world. I'll dare say Shadowrun can create a very sandbox environment. I have a setting that has interesting things that can be defined within it. I have players who come in with a loose goal, right? The reason why they're all together is a very simple one.
Sure, we all need money.
And they can pick from the playlist, if you will, to decide what they do and don't want to do. It's just job after job.
The only song on the playlist in a Shadowrun game is Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap.
Exactly. But it's still, the reason why you're doing it can be varied, but it doesn't matter. You're just going to keep doing that thing. As long as you're keeping it within the sandbox scope, right? Mm-hmm. The thing is that at a certain point, it just is a loop, and there's no interest to it. The only reason why D&D has an interest is because levels create new things for you. That's the benefit.
Yeah.
If you remove those, for instance, and you say, I don't know, there is no levels, or you start at level 4, and we're not adding any experience, so the game is the game, suddenly the game has to be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And there just isn't one there when all you do is kill and change gear. So my misconceptions come down to this, is that people don't understand player agency, sandbox, and the word narrative. I think those three things are all put at odds in a triad. No one is teaching what those are. We do. We talk about it here.
Yeah.
But we are one voice in a very small community trying to get bigger.
Yeah.
So having the idea that a sandbox and player agency and narrative are at odds is a misconception and is flat out wrong. Just because you came into TTRPGs with the idea that a grindhouse is your idea and players die, and then you move on and make another player.
Yeah, you should have a stack of characters ready to go because you're going to mill through those.
Right.
You know.
That isn't a sandbox either. That's just roguelike, right? And that's where a lot of people came from because they felt that they had agency to just keep playing, right? And saying that if you go into a D&D game and there are plot hooks and a thread where you have somewhere to go, and that immediately makes it a railroaded narrative.
Yeah.
That now I don't have a choice. I have to do this. I can't be this lone wolf. Right?
Mm-hmm.
No, that just makes you a bad player in a multiplayer game.
Yeah.
That makes you the dude in Minecraft who, when everyone shows up, you're like, I'm going to take off this way. See you guys in a few.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you're no longer playing with friends. You're just on the same server. Sorry, that's how that works.
I've been on those servers before. Okay, guys, we're going to build a community. Oh, I just killed the Underdragon. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah. I used a shovel to do it.
Yeah.
You know, with a bucket on my head.
You guys need a stack of diamonds?
Exactly. Exactly. So I think the part that gets me is TTRPGs are not a grindhouse of characters killing one another that makes player agency over railroading.
Mm-hmm.
TTRPGs are not an open world where you can do whatever you want and go wherever you want because there's no plot. That isn't what makes it a sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
TTRPGs are not a silent GM waiting for you to make a decision so that they can place models and terrain and roll counter dice, waiting for you to do something cool or make a decision that makes it not narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? All of those things, in my opinion, are bad gaming. You're not being a storyteller, you're not being a good player, and you're not understanding what player agency is. What you do with your character is player agency. When the storyteller doesn't take away your actions or make your actions meaningless and have no effect within the scene, they don't necessarily have to impact the world in a great way,
Sure.
but they definitely have to have weight within the story to be able to do that. And we have whole generations of gamers. I'm not talking ages. I'm not talking Gen X, Gen Y. That is not what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
I'm talking about when you entered into playing TTRPGs, post-digital, age, and you've been playing them for a period of time. Those people find themselves that they are not in roguelike grindhouses, and they think they don't have agency.
And they feel railroaded because of it.
Correct. And that is the common misconception I find every time out there.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm going to say is players out there who are concerned about storied games that have narrative and plot, and storytellers who are trying their best to make sure that there is meaning and impact within their stories, understand that this is not removing your agency.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't making it not open world. What this is trying to make impact for what you as characters are doing, to make you big damn heroes or monsters or whatever your player is motivated and moving through.
Yeah. The to me, like the conclusion I begin to draw here is that you've got people think that your players driving the plot is what makes it a sandbox. You can't have a plots coming up to them and trying to rope them in and stuff like that. They have to be making the decisions, otherwise it's not player agency. But first off, your characters can always choose to interact, not to interact, and how to interact. Okay?
That is agency.
That is agency, right? And having a plot does not remove that agency. Okay? A good storyteller will then say, okay, they didn't engage with that. What are the consequences of not engaging, if there are any?
Sure.
And what can I better put forward to them that will engage them?
Exactly.
Since they didn't engage with the thing that I offered them.
Yep.
And the more you start to look at it, the less you kind of acknowledge that the term sandbox really kind of exists.
So I will say this, and this is, I said this to you earlier, and I think it really puts it in my headspace accurately, and that is, sandbox is a start point.
Yeah.
That's all it is. That is all it is. It can sometimes be a return point,
Mm-hmm.
but sandboxing is literally where you say, I, as a storyteller, don't have a direction. I haven't prepared anything. I really don't have. I have some ideas about how the world functions.
Mm-hmm.
I know the movement of pieces in a grand scale. So once I see the players and get to know them and see what buttons they want to push or what directions they want to step in or whatever it may be, then I can start to work with them to push a narrative down a direction. And at that point, yes, you are doing a narrative, and you are following a narrative flow. You're listening. Now, you can do that reactively or proactively.
Sure.
There's different ways to do that. We've talked about it.
And your players can still retain agency throughout that narrative.
And I hope they do.
Yeah,
I really hope they
exactly.
do. Otherwise, you might be railroading.
Sure.
But that's a check at that point. And when it's all over, as long as they have received a benefit at the end of it and have found joy and are interested to continue within this world framework you have, you can go right back to the open world design.
Mm-hmm.
They can find interest in the other things that you may have left for them as scraps within that previous narrative, that it was part of the open world that was living and breathing around them, which you should always have.
Mm-hmm.
But there's nothing to say that they can't just immediately come back and build their house or farm or do whatever. Retire the character if they want to.
They want to play Stardew Valley for a month and a half? Go let them,
And I think that's the key difference within the framework is that Stardew Valley is a start point for plots to grow from and return to. And I think that's the One Ring does really well.
Yeah.
Is that you go on an adventure. The process of getting there is a little random in some things.
From a safe home base out into the world on the journey to the destination, and then on the journey home as well.
Correct. And you know that there are things out there. You're aware of them because the world is breathing around you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the storyteller giving you those sprinkles that are out there for you to say, I'm interested in that. I'm going to go in that direction. And now we have a narrative.
Yeah. You bring up the One Ring, and rightly so. The game I want to bring up as the MVP of Sandboxes for me is Dungeon World. I mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
I said I'd get back to it.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Honestly, the two things that they wrote in that book that stick with me forever. It was my introduction to Powered by the Apocalypse.
Yes.
And those two things that have stuck with me forever that I think are the heart and soul of what a sandbox is to me. And that is draw a map but leave blanks. And be a fan of your players. Okay? If your players pick up something and go, this is fun and interesting, man, you make that thing the central part of your plot because the players have said it is fun and interesting. And as a storyteller, my job is to make my story and my world and my game sessions that I am facilitating fun and interesting for my players and make sure that everybody is smiling at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay? If I am sitting here going, this is going to be a slog and my world doesn't care, that doesn't sound fun at all.
No.
Nobody's going to enjoy playing my game.
Not for long.
Not for long, at least.
Yeah.
So, be a fan of your players. Draw a world, leave some blanks. Let your players tell you what's in those blanks. Your world's going to be richer for it.
Yep. All right, we have good questions.
We have
and quite a few of them.
Really good questions.
So thank you, everyone.
Do you want to mix it up or do you want to start from the top here?
I'll let you choose.
All right, so let's just start from the top. Keep things in order here. So, Nevim, as per usual, we've got a bunch of questions. How do you efficiently prepare a sandbox game? I'm going to be straight up with you, Nevim. I don't think there is an efficient way to prepare a sandbox game.
I think there is. I think there are some efficient ways. And I think your efficiency, basically, you're still doing many of the things you would do for a normal game. Mm-hmm. You're still meta understanding your players. You're letting them know whether it's violent or anything like that. But as far as the sandbox is concerned, that aspect of it.
You're right, I take it back. Hold on. Go ahead.
The parts that for me, that really make it efficient for a sandbox is making sure that the players know about the world. Mm-hmm. That they are presented with the world, but they're not presented with all of the problems.
That's the thing. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now,
having given it a moment of thought while you were talking, that's
yes.
where I was going to go with it.
The three things you have to understand is basically sandboxes can be something, but you have worlds that are either a pre-generated setting mm-hmm. where you can hand them novella of information about the setting. Great. That's sure. Wonderful. Doesn't matter. Right? They can then look at that and get ideas for who they are and where they might fit into the world. But the thing is when they come together, when you build something like that, you have to give them a fixed point of origin. Mm-hmm. And that fixed point of origin has to let them know where they sit within the world, where they crash landed effectively within that setting. And I say crash landed because that's often a good way to start when you don't know where you are.
Sure, I played No Man's Sky. I know how that goes.
Right. So you might be mindless in a space, but you know where you're sitting.
Yeah.
Right? The second is that you have a purpose for them to be there. The setting is existing, but the reason why they're getting pulled together is the next point of that.
What do they do?
Right. Or what are they currently doing that puts them all in put all their butts in the same seats?
Yeah, even if it's just like professional dungeon delvers. Where's the dungeon?
Great.
Give us a dungeon.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Sure. Wonderful. Right. And then the third one of those is something that is breaking them from the norm of their existence. Now, this is the one that I saw that I felt was weird until I really understood what it was, and that is that not everyone starts out as a hero. Mm-hmm. Some people start as zeros. In fact, almost everyone starts as a zero. So the point is that what is breaking them from this to put them into the world? What is their crash point?
What is the pebble that disturbed the thing and turned it into a landslide of adventure?
Correct. Once they understand that vector, mm-hmm. you've got your start point to be able to put the sprinkles out before them.
Yep.
That's what you need. That's the prep point so that they all understand. So those three things become what you have to imagine. So you have the setting can be given, but they still have to know where they land, or what their purpose for being within that setting is, or what is the thing that is breaking them from their norms. Mm-hmm. And those, in most cases, are going to be a common thing between all the characters. Regardless of how they observe it, what their perception point of it is all the same breaking point. There is a revolution going on. That's going to upset a lot of people for a lot of reasons.
Sure.
But they can all point something at that. Mm-hmm. You're all poor and reputationless. Okay? We need money or fame.
Yeah.
Great.
And sometimes you discover this stuff in session 0. Everybody starts making an independent character and you go, oh, wow, we all have dead mothers, like, or something like that.
Issues,
yeah, exactly. Like, what do you think that's what brought us together? Right. Maybe there was something behind all that, and your players start talking and they invent that on their own. But
So, there you
go. The only thing I would add is going right back to don't write anything that isn't in front of your characters. How do you efficiently go about writing the sandbox game, preparing for a sandbox game? By not preparing 90% of it.
Make a brochure.
Make the 10% of it what is in front of your characters, mm-hmm. sketch out a few avenues of escape from that place, and then wait to see what they choose before sketching anything else. Because if you try to sketch your entire world with, as one of our comments that we read earlier elaborated on, 40,000 years worth of world history, you are doing too much.
Yes, I agree. You're writing novellas.
How can I mix a sandbox game and a mission-like game?
It's called Stargate.
Yeah.
Watch the series.
You give them a plethora of choices. Mm-hmm. There you have your player agency. You have your sandbox element of they can go anywhere and do anything. But once they make a choice, you then write a fun, interesting, engaging plot that will be interesting to the players and provide them with interesting choices and interesting outcomes.
Yes.
until they complete that, return to the safety of home, and then we make another choice.
Yep. That's the key to a good... And that thing is that the choice may be we're sitting around having Cheetos and watching a game.
Sure.
Great. That's a choice.
That's a choice.
That's a total choice.
It's downtime.
Yep.
You know? Let's see here. Does a sandbox game imply more active players? I would say it requires more active players, in fact.
Yeah. I would agree, because if your players are asking for a sandbox, then what they're saying is that they want more space within that to move around.
Yeah, there's a bit of a dilemma that comes in. We touched on this a little bit earlier, where there's a conflict of interest in most people's definition of a sandbox between player agency. The players make all the decisions of what to do and where to go, and the world is just there and doesn't care about them. And I want to have a big, living, breathing world with things going on all the time that go on around the players. The players cannot exist in a living, breathing world without being influenced by it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're influenced by the world, you're going to be plot hooked into things. You know, consider just the average YouTube rabbit hole that all of us have fallen down from one time to another, okay? YouTube hands me an algorithm. It says, these videos might be interesting to you. It suggests something, and I go, huh, that's a catchy thumbnail, and I click on it. What that is the world, YouTube, offering me a plethora of choices because it is doing things. It has created that algorithm, and it is constantly changing with what videos are up there, what content creators are creating things, etc., etc.
What's trending, what's not.
What's trending, what's not, exactly. And then I have chosen to engage with one of those things that I wouldn't have chosen to if the YouTube algorithm weren't trying to suggest it to me. And once I've made that choice, I am engaged with it, and then I follow where that goes. Maybe I click on another video because that topic was intriguing to me.
But the key also is that at the end, when you close out of those and go back to your home, it knows. It saw what you did, and now it knows your interest. And there's 5 more videos in the general same vein, and or from the same people or within interest circles.
Yes.
It is listening.
So the question then becomes, was YouTube, i.e. the world, the plot, the storyteller, the active one that put that in front and removed my agency by giving me a suggestion and expecting me to click on it? Or was it I, the player, the viewer of that YouTube, clicking on it, it was that my active choice to do so, right? Is there a meaningful difference? I submit to you there really isn't.
No. And I think it's a sprinkle, or as I said earlier, it's that taste at the beginning. I think the part that we haven't brought back around, which is the part that I'm going to bring up right here, which is the fact that when you click on that video and then there's a follow-up video, that's your quantum ogres.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I knew you'd be interested in this, and now you're wanting to be interested in this next one. And you're like...
So I moved it from here and put it in front of you.
And now you're like, yep. I am interested in that, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is how that works for quantum ogres.
But I guess in the purest sense of a sandbox, yeah, you are going to be looking for more active players because you are going to be depending on them to make choices to show you where you need to write the world for them.
Right. They're going to need to be able to communicate with you.
All right, and his last question, how do you incorporate an overhaul plot in a sandbox game? I'm not really sure. Overall plot.
I think that's
in a
what that is,
game?
yes. So, in my personal opinion, in a sandbox game is an opening point. It is not an overall plot. If you're thinking of an overall plot, maybe you're actually thinking about world events.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do a world event, that's just setting moving around the players. And that's a style of storytelling where basically the players have agency within it, but the events are going to happen.
Yeah.
They're not part of those events. The story isn't about them affecting those events.
They're environmental events like a revolution or a storm.
Or a war, or any number of other things
Yeah.
that are just outside of their reach.
Yep.
You know? And that is very common. But within those events, there are stories to be told. People to be saved, places to go, things to experience. I mean, whole movies have been made within overarching events. So I think if you're looking for an overall plot in that sense that pushes to that scale, that's really what that is. Otherwise, if you want to create an overall plot and you have an idea for something, it is your sprinkles that start things to find the interest that your players are leaning toward. And then at that point, you can then do breadcrumbing to see which direction they want to go.
I would dare say, by the understanding of what we've come to know a sandbox to be throughout the course of this discussion, the pure act of having an overall plot is antithesis to a sandbox.
Right. You're not starting at a sandbox then, because you're not presenting them with multiple plots.
Right. And if at any point you have strung together a confluence of events in your sandbox that points towards an overall plot, and you decide to seize upon it and say, I am going to connect these things and I'm going to make that the story, you have officially moved out of sandbox and into narrative.
Correct.
And that's fine.
That's fine.
That's absolutely
Congratulations.
fine. That's a good move as far as I'm concerned.
You've just simplified your existence.
Yeah, you've just simplified your existence because you know exactly what sort of stuff you need to be writing now.
Or at least you know the vector of where the story is going and how the players can push that vector.
Yes, exactly.
So,
all right, Overwatch asks, do any game systems come to mind that lend themselves to a more sandbox-style game? Or any that would make running a sandbox-style game more difficult?
I would say both of those things are true for a lot of systems. I think, again, working with the definition as we have defined it, sandbox games are a great start point. So one of the best things, at least in my mind frame, is making sure that all the players are on the same page. Even players who don't necessarily, and I'm going to use a term here that I wouldn't normally use, but I think it frames it better. When players have maybe not the creativity or activity level coming into a game to maybe make a deep character who has goals and stuff like that.
No, that's fair. There's no judgment in that. There's players come in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, and they play for different reasons.
Yeah.
So having a sandbox game that starts, like I said, with a common goal for players of why they're there so that they don't have to think about it. Like, why am I here? You're a Shadowrunner. What is that? Shadowrunners look for money or fame or glory. Oh, okay, it's easy for me to figure out. Boom. It doesn't matter what the plot hooks are out there because they're not looking for those. So that's a good thing. All washing up on a shore is great because y'all came from the same ship, and one of those people could have amnesia and have no idea who they are. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Right? There's at that point, because you're all just trying to survive. And I think having survival as a thing, that is a great drive as well. That's a direct point. Knowing how the world is, there are dangerous dinosaurs here. You need to work together to survive. That's a direction. So it's not saying how to do it. It's not saying what's going to happen next. It's not even saying where you guys should go to try and survive. It's literally like, this is what you need to do. So that way, as a group, decisions can be made. So it's not just one player, a bunch of individual players who have individual drive coming up with their neat character backgrounds and stuff that you then can weave together. So I would say that games that have settings and mechanics built in to gift you that are a great start point for sandboxes.
Wow, that's an excellent answer.
I would say that D&D is a challenging game for sandboxes.
I don't know about that. I mean, it's got a lot of its roots in things like OSR and Hexcrawl and stuff like that. So, like, you can...
Keep going. I'm going to explain why, but I want to hear...
No, I mean, look, the thing about D&D's gameplay loop is it's pretty simplistic. Because basically everything just comes down to combat, right?
Oh, I agree.
So if you can find fun and interesting ways to make their choices lead to a new and fun and interesting combat encounter, boom, you've got a sandbox game. I don't care which direction you guys go, I can find something for you to fight when you get there.
And my concern with that is it makes sandboxing difficult because it doesn't give you anything other than levels to represent how you're doing, and it creates it into a roguelike game.
Sure.
In my personal opinion, that's not a sandbox game then.
I'd hate it, but it's still a sandbox.
And that's why I won't agree with it.
Yeah.
The tool sets aren't complete. It says use a CR rating. That's against a sandbox design. Right there. Like,
I'm sorry, y'all can't hear me shrugging over a microphone.
Right. But the whole point of where that scaling and leveling comes from in those commentaries that people make, that's D&D that invented that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, that's video games and D&D that pushed that into tabletop RPGs. That wasn't there before.
Yeah.
So the only reason why it was there was to tell you how much XP you got from it.
I don't know. I don't think they're particularly mutually exclusive either.
But what I'll come down to is I would say the other games that aren't sandboxy or that don't lend themselves well to sandboxy are ones where you are given too much. And you have to, there's too much world and design out there, or too much character design out there for you to even wrap your hands around to say, how am I bringing this together?
I'm going to disagree with you there.
Okay.
Because, again, assuming you have the right type of group for it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Assuming you have a group conducive to it.
Right.
Okay. Having that wealth of information and that wealth of world building already done for you and such like that, an educated player will be able to make educated decisions about where they want to wander. And that solves one of the core problems I had with exploration to begin with, which was, okay, here, you're in a world, go anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay,
why?
Where?
Yeah.
What's driving me towards one direction or another any more than anything else? Do we just pick a random number between 1 and 360, point our compass towards that, and go?
Yeah.
Or, but an educated player in a game that does have a very rich world, like, I mean, we'll go back to D&D, okay? Faerun. I mean, decades worth of lore have been built into Faerun, okay? An educated player who knows Faerun like it's their own backyard is going to be able to go, drop into a sandbox game and go, I got an idea. Let's head to Candlekeep, or whatever,
Sure.
Here's the reasons why. Here's a goal we would be accomplishing by doing so. Or, I've always wanted to just go there and find out what happens because X, Y, or Z is rumored to have been there.
Yeah.
And
in that sense, I think, and this is just me, you run the risk as a storyteller not being able to keep up. You have too much. It's volumetric problems. Now you have to figure out, what is Candlekeep? Where is Candlekeep? Do I need to buy a bunch of shit to figure out how to run this adventure? Do I just grab the adventure and run the adventure?
I mean, the good news is there's a map, and there is an adventure, and
therefore
all
it is
that
no
work is
longer
already
a
done for you.
sandbox. All you did was metagame a session 0 with your players to find out where they wanted to go.
Is it a sandbox if your players still have the agency to say they want to go to Candlekeep and you say, okay?
Then you're... Again, I don't think that's a sandbox game. That is literally...
Why not?
Because all you did was session 0 and they said that's where they wanted to go, and so session 1 starts the adventure Candlekeep.
Well, you don't... No, I'm just saying Candlekeep is a destination. You don't have to run Candlekeep Adventures or whatever the name of the module is.
But
okay.
But again, what I'm saying is that if I have... And I'll give another example. Dune.
Sure.
There's a ridiculous amount of information in Dune.
Dune is a sandbox. That's funny on a lot of levels.
Thank you. But at the same time, as a storyteller, like, if players want to do... I don't know, go fight the Harkonnens and take them out.
Good idea.
Okay, that's
nobody likes them.
I'm kind of with you on all that. They want to go to Ix, get a lot of machines, go, mess up the Fremen, use the Fremen to go take care of them, whatever. Like, there's a lot of work effort that you now have to do that game really doesn't give you all the tool sets for knowledge-wise.
My Discord handle is a killing word.
Yes. So that's all I'm saying. From my perspective, that's where I see that. I see some games that are acceptably where, like, Stars Without Numbers, go have fun.
Yeah.
Go freaking...
It's an exceptional sandbox game, yeah.
Enjoy yourself. That game plays both sandbox and non-sandbox equally as well.
I have a slightly different answer from you. What makes a crappy sandbox game? Any game that is designed for a short-form game. We reviewed Arc Doom.
Oh God, yeah.
Terrible sandbox game. Why? Because it's meant to be played in like 1 to 3 sessions.
Yeah.
You don't have the room to go anywhere and have, you know...
Is there a Doom clock? Then not a sandbox game.
Yeah, exactly. Something like Jiangxi, Blood in the Banquet Hall.
Not
a sandbox game.
No.
That is a game about a group of Chinese immigrants in Chinatown in the 1920s running a restaurant and fighting hopping vampires.
Yep. Brindlewood Bay.
That is what it is about.
Yeah.
You do not have agency to not be a Chinese immigrant, not run a Chinese restaurant, or not fight hopping vampires. If you want that, you shouldn't be playing Jiangxi.
Yes. Oh, there's so
yeah, like
many...
you said, Brindlewood Bay. Would I choose? I want to play Brindlewood Bay, but I don't want to be an old woman who's a fan of murder
author.
novels.
Well, too bad. That's what you are.
Guess what? Sorry. Here's your
Secretly,
red hat.
You are.
Here's your red hat. Here's your ball of yarn. Here's your 7 cats. Now go solve a mystery.
Exactly. There's somebody dead. Oh, yes.
All right,
yes.
Clement A. Clement or Clement? I'm not sure. Clement A says, or asks, it feels like the hardest session would be session 1 because of the following sessions. The story starts to take on a life of its own and builds itself thanks to the players. What would you prepare for a session 1 after session 0, and how?
So, for me, in a sandbox game, which I've definitely run a few in the past, sometimes poorly.
Mm-hmm.
Session 0 is always learning about the drives of your characters, finding out what their interests are, seeing what the player is interested in, and what they believe their character is interested in.
Yes.
And I use that always because they will change their freaking minds.
No character survives contact with the plot.
Just as much as the plot doesn't.
Yes.
So, session 1 is always, what can you throw at them that is interesting for each of them in such a way that it is a flavor. It is not a hook. It is just, what is this within your interest list?
Mm-hmm.
Once it is, now you can prepare. A lot of times, we've talked about this multiple times, that session 1 should often be the soft shoe of the mechanics. It should be a milk run. It should be something simple that gets everybody involved in the game in a simple way.
Put them in a simple fight, a simple social situation, put them in a simple exploration encounter, whatever.
Yeah.
Something to kind of showcase a sampler platter of the mechanics of the game.
Take them from home, put them in the wilderness, take them to where they're going, where the adventure occurs, bring them back through the wilderness, have them speak with somebody, close the adventure.
Yep.
And those steps you can sprinkle in parts of the world, things that you find intriguing that may have been part of their interests.
They learn a little bit of the lore, they learn a little bit of their compatriots, and they learn a little bit about themselves.
Yep, that's it. And that's for any game, sandbox or not.
Yeah.
You do not run plot opening.
Yeah.
Don't do plot opening.
Yeah.
Let that first one just be a straight up adventure. Now, could it, if you're running a plot, could it have implications upon it? Sure, why not? Mm-hmm. Could it be a world-setting situation that then ends with a hard move by the world that occurs? Sure, why not? But the whole point of it is for you to learn them as much as they're learning the system.
Yeah, I think everything you just said was great. Mm-hmm. The only thing I would add, though, is that a large portion of what you're going to bring to session 1 is stuff you figured out in session 0.
Yes.
Okay. For me, the biggest hurdle I'm going to have in session 1 is figuring out what to do with the party, what direction to offer them. Because if we're doing Sandbox, right, I don't want to railroad them even into a milk run. I don't want to be like, here's your plot. Because, again, we're not doing Sandbox then. What I want to do, though, is that during session 0, figure out what sorts of things do you want to do. You guys create the menu of activities that you want me to choose from that are going to be fun and engaging for you. Okay, what sort of a sandbox are we looking for? Are you looking for more exploration and intrigue, like high-stakes archaeology, like an Indiana Jones-style game? Or are you looking for dungeon-delving combat? Are you looking for wandering the countryside, getting into political intrigue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
You guys tell me.
And then it becomes the milk run of that.
Yeah, exactly. And then session 1, I can take that information and use that to say, okay, there are job postings in this random town we have begun in. Here are some choices that all fit the things you told me during session 0.
Yep.
You can make your choice. That's agency.
Yep. I think that's great. And the last question that squeezed in under the wire by JGenX.
JGenX asks, one type of sandbox game is a West Marches campaign, also known as an open table campaign where one or more GMs and a rotating cast of players play in a shared world. In your opinion, what are the challenges in running these types of games? First and foremost, it has to be completely episodic.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because you have a rotating cast of characters. If you can never depend on a certain character to be there, you can never build plot pertaining to that character.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least you can make plot consequences that branch off from that character's choices, but you can never cater something directly. Like, you can't have like an NPC showing up to talk to that character specifically because you don't know if that character is ever going to be at your table again.
I argue that you can.
Okay.
But my point, I think your point still stands that you can't make them a requirement of the plot. But there is no difference that if someone comes to have a hard discussion about Ravana's actions, that the group won't be like, I'm sorry, she's not here right now. What's going on? Very
Please
well.
leave your name, number, and a brief message, and she will turn you into a popsicle at her convenience.
Right.
Thank
and then
you. Goodbye.
They come to find out, oh, good. Well, this is, well, then understand that she is wanted, and a wanted poster goes up on the wall, for a certain amount of money for the murder of so-and-so. Okay, well, now it went from Ravana needs to figure out what's going on here and find the truth, to we need to clear Ravana's name before she gets caught.
I don't think that's necessary. Ravana the Ice Witch murdered them in cold blood.
Oh, man.
Man, she really just needs to chill out.
You got any more?
Nope, I'm done.
All right. So,
we'll put a freeze on the topic.
I knew you were going to go there. Yeah, you were going to go there. We have players who live. We have listeners who literally live for these moments and these terrible puns. All right, I think we have officially
belabored the point. And
it's cold and dead.
You were almost completely accurate on your 2-hour time.
I told you. I told you.
I'm gonna. Yeah, that'll pay dividends right there.
There we go. So our next topic is a system spotlight.
System spotlight. All right.
I tried to get in a game of Root. I really did for Gen. I wanted to go to Gen Con and play Root just so that I could have it before we did the system spotlight, and alas, it did not work. But I will be stopping by Root and some of the tables and looking in on some of the stuff that they have.
So Root looks absolutely adorable. It's by Magpie Games. We've talked about some of their games before. They were the ones that did Apellion, the Dragon Chronicles.
Yes.
And so Root is a 2022 game. Won the Emmy Award for Best Game.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings woodland creatures together to fight for money, justice, and freedom from the powers far greater than them.
Yes.
So we're going to be diving into just an adorable little game about furry animals in the forest doing
cute, fuzzy, wonderful
furry, almost
things.
like Mouse Guard grew up.
There's so many neat things about Root that I'm not going to get into until we get to it. So I am going to send some stuff out for Gen Con. I look forward to seeing your guys' comments in Discord, and we will talk those who are on Patreon, and hopefully some of the listeners who will join me Gen Con.
Heat Sink calling us out in the live chat. He says, "Is it really a new system, Sarah?" No, it's powered by the apocalypse. It's not a new system, but they do fun and interesting and new things with it, and it is a new setting, and you will like it.
Hold on, it's powered by the apocalypse. It is not a free world game.
It is, it's not Free League.
It's not Free League. We've stepped away from Free League for a little while.
At least it's not Free League, guys.
Yeah, we are bouncing around. We are deliberately trying to bounce around.
But we are going back to Magpie, which is becoming Free League, Diet Free League for us. So
no, there's gonna be a lot of people at Magpie. I think they're doing great this year. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyways, you can find us on X, I guess now at st_conclave. On Instagram at st_conclave. Listen to us live every Wednesday night, except for right now, on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And join us up on our Discord. We'd love to hear some suggestions for you for future shows, talk to our other storytellers, bounce some campaign ideas off on them, and toss us some questions. We'd love to answer them here on the air for you. You can find that link on our Twitter, on our X, as well as storytellerconclave.com.
I never feel comfortable with
I know.
that. We'd like to thank our Patreon members, especially our name members, Knox in the Box, Subjet, Sam, the Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion Veteran, Hulu, and Sean. We really appreciate all your support. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems or on Instagram at the same. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find them at geefrog.bandcamp.com or on Google Music or on Instagram and YouTube now. And our outro music is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find them at freemusicarchive.org.
And a big shout out, as always, to our families, Vicky and Sean. Thank you so much for loving
Thank
and
you.
supporting us. All of our friends who've sat with us at our tables over these years to give these great stories to share with you. And you, every single one of our listeners. We love you guys so much.
Love you guys.
Good night.